Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. What a terrific night we have for this donor thank you event. Thank you to everyone who has become a friend of Glacier, and without you, we would not be able to fund the projects that we are able to make possible in the park. In 2019, we broke the 10,000 Friends of Glacier mark with 10,000 donors. I'm Doug Mitchell. I have the great privilege of being the executive director of the Glacier National Park Conservancy, and I'm joined tonight with my colleagues, Amy Lucky, who will be helping curate the questions and interaction with our guest, and of course, the amazing Emily Evans, without whom you would just be having a black screen, and I would be having a very dark life myself. So again, thank you very much for the generous contributions that make our work possible. As I mentioned, in 2019, we bypassed the amazing number of 10,000 supporters in that year to the Glacier National Park Conservancy. And because of that, we were able to fund over $2 million of projects in the park, 77 projects. And over the last 4 years, we've averaged over $2 million in support for Glacier National Park. And we are very privileged to do that work. And it is only possible with you and with great partners like our dear friend, Jake Bramante, who is our guest tonight. I'm going to get out of the way here really quickly because Jake is an amazing advocate for Glacier National Park. You all know all about Jake, so he doesn't need a lot of introduction. I've had the good fortune of being able to spend time with Jake in the park and outside the park. My favorite Jake story, and I think we were coming down probably Dawson-Pitamakan, and I'm walking ahead of Jake, and he's talking to one of the other hikers. And there's a mom and a daughter from Chicago, and they are having a fan moment because the mom is saying to the daughter, "I think that's Jake Bramante." And I said, "Well, would you like to meet him?" And they're like, "Oh, we couldn't. We just couldn't." We watched all of his videos. And of course, Jake was completely gracious and had a nice visit with them. And it really is, Jake, meaningful for us to have the relationship we have with you. All of you will have gotten your newsletter. Jake and Kristen have the Why We Give section in that newsletter, and they have been incredibly generous and gracious with their time, their talent, and their treasure. So Jake Bramante, welcome.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me. This is super fun.
Yeah, we, as I said, have been able to spend a little bit of time on the trails together, and we want folks tonight really this is the night, this is your night. Talk to Jake, ask questions of Jake. You can use the chat. You can certainly unmute yourself as well and just fire away with questions or comments to Jake. But I'll just start, Jake. 10 years ago last month, right? Or earlier this month was the anniversary of when you started this whole lame-brained idea of yours.
Very much lame-brained. I was trying to figure out my existence. I was in office, chained to the desk. I felt like it was in a Gilbert cartoon. And so I was resetting my life, and I remember taking a shower one morning thinking about, I had this little project where I was going to make a bunch of videos of Glacier, like waterfalls of Glacier, lakes of Glacier, something like that. And so I just thought, I'm like, I haven't been all over the park. There's so many trails I haven't been on. And I wondered if anybody had hiked all the trails, and figured that somebody probably had, and that is true. But I was like, I wonder if anybody's ever done it in one summer. And that was the genesis of the project. And then I quickly, I was trying to figure out if anybody had done it in one summer. And so I started reaching out to a bunch of different people. And one of those people was Jane Ratzliff, the executive director of the then Glacier Fund, which it used to be Glacier Fund and the Glacier Natural History Association. And then they ended up merging, but at the time it was just the Glacier Fund. And I reached out to her and said, "Hey, do you want to partner with this?" And Jane was like, she was crazy like that. And so we, they ended up giving me a little bit of money, which helped with some of my camera equipment. And the fun story about that is that when we did, at the very end of the hike, I gave a presentation in November at the O'Shaughnessy Center. in Whitefish, and it was a paid event, and we raised more money than they had lent me. So which made me feel good, because I hate when there's this the idea of like sponsoring or something like that for exposure and stuff. So it was really nice to actually have like an actual a return on investment for that. But it started like this relationship, and then I think it was in 2012, I did some contract work, like helping the first iteration of the Conservancy logo, and worked with folks like Greg, I can see who's here, and just worked on getting the Conservancy and the Natural History Association merged into the Glacier Conservancy. And so it was really cool, because that was when I got to see, kind of from the inside out, the work that they did, even more so than what I had kind of witnessed and stuff. And so ever since then, I've kind of, it's been a really fun partnership to work on that. And, especially when I'm raising funding for like a Harlequin duck study, and then I'm out there in the field with Lisa Bate, the park biologist who does that. And then holding a Harlequin duck after it's been banded, and then releasing it and having it poop on me first, because that's one of the, that you are doing science when an animal, goes to the bathroom on you. And so that's at least what I've been told. So I feel like I've done some real field work.
That, somebody feels better is what we often say when that happens. Yeah. So it's just so much to talk about, so many things to talk about, Jake. But you haven't limited yourself to Glacier. Hike 734 has kind of spread its wings, and you've got a bunch of different places you've been and have maps for as well.
Yeah. So when I was working at the Conservancy, I got married in May of 2012. And in that process, we went down to Maui and Mauich, little joke for Princess Bride lovers. But when we were down in Maui, there's a road to Hana, which is their famous road that goes along the coast on the north side. And it's beautiful. And we had been given a couple of different resources. Like one was a mile marker guide of things you can stop and do. And then another one was a book, and we had a map, and it was all these different things. And we ended up wasting a lot of time stopping at really stupid places. And a book I had read essentially was talking about helping people answer questions of like, when people ask you questions about something, they usually are asking you're an authority in some level. And so if you can try and put all that knowledge into one place, that's a way you can build a product. So anyways, that sounded way more confusing than it needed to be. But ultimately what I did was I took the idea of all those three components and came up with a driving guide for going to the Sun Road. And I came out with that in 2013. And then that model of a map on one side and a guidebook on the other with my recommendations, those three components is what I did to come out with my day hike map. And once that came out, that really went well. And so I decided to pivot, and then we did Zion, and then Yellowstone, and the Tetons, and a bunch of other parks. And so it's turned into its own beast. And I'm super thankful that it is its own beast, because it's what I do now.
And I think there are some lucky participants tonight who are going to be able to be the recipients of some Jake swag.
That is the rumor going around the office.
Excellent. That's exciting. And Amy, thank you for helping with that endeavor. And I think you are going to help curate some questions, and then you and Jake are going to do the giveaway at some point during the evening as well, correct?
Correct. Yeah, we welcome any questions for Jake, whether they are like super hike specific or just general questions about Jake's process and where he's been the last few years and what he's been up to. So I could start things off a little bit, because I have a super specific question. Right before we got on, we were talking about the Dawson Pitamakan hike. And if anybody's done that, it's, just this super loop in the Two Medicine area. And I think the coolest thing is that you're up high for so long, but you can go either way. What's the best way to go?
I think Doug and I share the right way to do things. So a lot of people like to go clockwise. And their reasoning, which is it's a good reason, but it ultimately is flawed in its overall concept. And that is they want to get the elevation out of the way right away. So they either walk I guess it would be the trail on the North Shore, or take the boat, and then they climb up to Dawson Pass first. The problem is that you end up getting in a bunch of the views early on, and then you spend the rest of the day hiking out the Dry Fork drainage, which is not very pretty walking your way out. The way I like to do it, it would be counterclockwise, and that allows you to work your way up the drainage, and then the hike progressively reveals itself all the way up Pittamakan Pass, and then you go around to the amazing Goat Traverse, which scares a lot of people to death. One of the reasons why that hike is so great is because it reminds me of climbing and doing a lot of these ridge walks, but it is not for the faint of heart. But then you come around to the other side and see the Bighorn Sheep and Bighorn Basin, but you're looking down into the Two Medicine Lake Basin. And then that's what you get to see on your way out. So, and the other part is there is a little sneaky ridge that comes off of Rising Wolf that is, you have to climb that at the very end of the day if you do it clockwise, and you don't even know it's there when you go counterclockwise. So for me, it's counterclockwise every time. I've done it both ways, and I'm a firm believer in that.
So I'm gonna step out of the way of my background, because that is Dawson Pittamakan hiking the direction Jake suggests, which is boat last instead of boat first. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So Jake, to your map project, what was the most challenging part of getting the idea of the map to the actual map in your hand?
Well, I had never used GIS software. And so I don't know, I don't really know how to answer the most in a lot of these types of questions. So I'll just talk about some of the struggles. But one of them was I had never used GIS software before. And I was going to go ahead and do a hand-drawn sort of a map similar to my driving guide. And then I realized quickly that I could not put enough data in that was required for a successful map. And so then I started learning GIS. There's a program, it's an open source program for those that are interested. It's called QGIS. And it was a way that I started building the map that way. And so I looked at a lot of, I obviously hiking a lot. Maps to me are just adventures. I mean, you look at them and it's just the possibilities. And I love looking at a big map as opposed to like something on your phone or the computer, because it just gives you such a great place or sense of place. And so that was one part. The other part was just writing. There's that thing when you're a kid and you write something and you think you did okay, and then the teacher hands you back just tons of red ink. And so I had to deal with that, the ego hit, because you write something and think that you're basically Hemingway, and then your wife or whoever your editor is goes, "Those aren't words, that are thoughts and sentences. I don't know what you were talking about." I'm like, "What are you talking about? That's gold. This is Old Man in the Sea." And then you read it and go, "I don't know words." So that whole process was brutal, and then, after that, there was a lot of the other stuff was, well, at this point, it's probably just kind of candy coated. But those are the two hardest parts: is writing and having it edited, and then just learning GIS. And then after that, it kind of became relatively formulaic. So that was very helpful. But each park has its own, as they said in the corporate world, not problems, but opportunities for growth.
And how do you go about doing that, right? So do you do it all in one fell swoop? Do you go out 2 weeks at a time? What's the process look like for it to go from hiking to map?
Yeah, so the process goes at the beginning of the summer for doing a park. I just go and just buy as many of the day hiking map resources that I can find, look online, and I create a spreadsheet, which is my punch list of all the day hikes. And sometimes, you'll have a day hike just, like in Glacier, you'll have Red Rock Lakes and then Bullhead Lake. Well, if you hike all the way to Swift Current Pass, that's one day of hiking, and that's a few different hikes. But I'd have a punch list, and then What ended up happening, especially with further away parks, is we have a camper van. And so I would drive my camper van RV down to wherever the park was, and I would hike for a week to 2 weeks, and then drive it to the airport to the temporary parking, and then fly back home for a week or something like that and take care of all kinds of stuff, and then fly back down and then wash, rinse, and repeat until I finished hiking the entire park, whether it's Yosemite or Rocky Mountain or whatever. And then at the very end of the project, drive it home. And then I just have this pile of footage and knowledge and whatever. And then then the winter is about getting it all taken care of. So.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's quite a process. Well, I'm going to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Amy Lucky. Those of you who have not been lucky enough to meet Amy, Amy is our donor engagement lead, and I love so much working with her. And she has really been the lead on also putting together these donor thank you events and the Glacier Conversation events that I know many of you have participated in. So thank you for that. And Amy, we've already got a ton of questions.
We already have a ton of questions. Yes, this is exciting. So Jake, Richard wants to know, he just says, please ask Jake about bears on trails. You have any stories for us?
Well, bears on trails. I like to see bears from trails. I always say a trail bear is way more interesting than a car bear. I'm not a big fan of the bears on the same trail that I'm on. I think a lot of people don't pay enough attention when they're hiking. I think that's probably one of the first things to always have in mind. I mean, there's a bunch of different things. Obviously, making a lot of noise, it gives the bear a heads up that you're coming. A surprise bear is not a positive experience usually. I've never had a negative encounter with a bear. And for those that believe in jinxes, I hope that I'm not doing myself a solid here, but I just have never come around. I've never, hiked right next to a moose carcass that I didn't know was there. I mean, those are the sorts of things those are the ones that kind of freak me out the most, those are just the unknowns. Obviously bears, I feel like bears are kind of like, I don't want to wade into Timothy Treadwell territory here. I think bears are kind of like unfamiliar dogs. They're a pretty expressive animal, and you can tell if you're too close because they get fidgety. And so if a bear is constantly looking back at you, you're too close. You need to give it a lot of space. And I think people don't read the room in that regard. And so, yeah, but as far as I don't obsess about seeing bears on trails. I like to see wildlife of all kinds, but I definitely don't seek out any encounters for sure. And I always hike with bear spray, and I just try and keep my head about me. I think that I've rewired my brain to notice things. I can spot things a lot better than I used to. And I think that just comes with practice, but I don't know. I'm thankful that I haven't come around a corner. I mean, because there's lots of seasoned people that would fall into the category or more as me, and they've come around a corner and there was a sow and two cubs, or, there might be a kill somewhere that they didn't know about. And that's just bad luck there. But beyond that, I think it's just about paying attention, making noise, carrying bear spray, hiking in larger groups when you can, and when you can't, just keep your head on a swivel. But I don't let it not have, and it's not a deterrent for me necessarily to go out. So, yeah.
It's kind of a good thing not to have a bear story, right? Not to have a real scary encounter.
Right.
So it looks like Tanya's looking for some secrets. She wants to know what's the most underrated hike in the park.
Oh man, what's the most underrated hike in the park? I'll have to tell, it's Otokomi Lake, right, Doug? I don't know. So for me, I think the hardest part for me when it comes to that kind of a question is I'm always more interested in an experience. I think that, when you look at the first thing is, if you look at the number one hike on any of my maps, I try to identify the most quintessential hike in a certain park. One that really, I think with Yellowstone, that might be a little bit of an exception, and that might be because I'm partial to views, but for the most part, the first hike is usually something you just kind of have to do. I mean, you have to hike the Highline Trail at some point. Half Dome and going to those areas, like they're just so iconic and important. But beyond that, I like to try and think that my map's going to take you to places, or the upper hikes are going to take you to places where, generally speaking, you're going to have a good experience, be it views or a waterfall or something. But ultimately, I'm more interested in having a cool experience. The time that I saw three wolves on the trail in Glacier was on a hike that I would never recommend anybody go on. There's a trail down over by Mirror Creek, and you have to look at the map and try and find that one in the Walton area of the park. And that's where I saw three wolves. And would you see three wolves? Probably not. Would I recommend you hike that trail? No. But if you've never been down there and you're looking for a really I guess a quasi interesting hike in the trees, by all means. But it was a lot of work to do that hike, and I think that's why I probably saw them, because there's not a lot of pressure down there from people. But for me, I'm always looking for an experience, and I think educating myself and learning more about birds, learning more about flowers, that kind of stuff, it helps me out, because then I notice more. I'm not just seeing a bunch of yellow flowers. I'm seeing there's, a couple species of arnica, and I'm seeing that there's, the Oregon grapes are in bloom, or, the warblers are back, or whatever it is. And so I think the more one gets educated on that, and plus, I mean, the park has a different personality every single time you step in, right? I mean, everybody knows, you guys have, if you've been to the park more than once, you've driven the road more than once, you know that the clouds can be amazing, or the sky can be a perfect blue, or the way the light's hitting the mountains. I mean, these are the certain, this is why we go out. So I know I'm kind of evading the question a little bit, but yeah, I think my ranking is probably, the first, like, there's that middle, like the fourth and fifth hikes and stuff when you start getting into there, and just looking for experiences. Yeah.
I've pulled my map out so that I can follow along. I hope all of you already have this map. If you don't, you should definitely get it. It is upside down. Is that better? That was bad product placement. Sorry, Jake.
Yeah, we can work on this.
And in the newsletter that you have, there's actually a QR code that will take you directly to this map on at glacier.org, and there's a discount code there as well. So back to you, Amy.
As Doug mentioned, we'll be doing a little giveaway here. 3 different products later on, so stick around. Sandy wants to know, does your map contain all the non-maintained trails as well? For example, the trail that goes northwest off the Kintla Trail towards the edge of the park. She can't remember the name, starts with a K, leads to a patrol cabin, something like that in your map.
It'd be Kishining Trail, right? Yeah. So there's an interesting tightrope to walk with my maps, and I see a couple of other questions there asking about climbing routes and such. So when you're creating something like this, there's a couple of different factors at play. One of them is, in order for it to be sold in park stores, you want to make sure that you are, making recommendations that the park would approve of. And so I did have my map earlier on reviewed by the park, and there was a couple of trails that they asked that I not put on there, and one of those would be the Kishining Trail. But it's not a huge secret, it's just not super published. And since I was making a day hike map, it wasn't super important to have that on there. I don't have climbing routes on there, in part because that's not what this audience is for. Although I do have some climbing blogs, and sometimes I question whether or not I should have those, just because I think there's a wide swath of people that might look at that and think that there's a good Instagram moment on the top of a summit that they don't have any business climbing because they're not prepared for. But my map is specific. My map itself is specific to day hiking in Glacier. So I don't have those, but that doesn't mean that I don't love to do that. I love to get up, do a lot of off trail stuff. That's one way to get away from from the crowds, but I don't have any climbing routes on my map itself.
A question about the Grand Canyon. Have you done the rim to rim at Grand Canyon National Park? And if no, do you have any plans to?
I regretfully have never been to the Grand Canyon, and I lived in Phoenix for like, I went to school down there, and at the time I was a computer nerd and a musician, and neither of those, we just never made a trip up there, and I regret it. But actually, in a way, I'm glad I didn't do it then, because I would appreciate it in a different way now. So it's definitely on my list to do. As far as making a map of the Grand Canyon, I don't see myself doing that, just because my map works best when it's a day hikeable park, as well as being highly visited and large. And Grand Canyon fills 2 of the 3, but it's not really a day hiking kind of a park, like a Yosemite or Olympic or Glacier or Rocky Mountain. So my maps tend to be, my particular map tends to just focus more on where it will be more helpful to people, instead of just, but I potentially might do a couple of Eastern parks. I've been asked about, like Acadia, the Smokies, and those are possibilities. We'll see. I just need to go out there and visit them and see if it's something that I want to tackle. We're spoiled here in the West. It's really hard to beat the Alpine, I mean, the Rockies, and then Olympic and in the Sierras are there's not a lot of parallels on the east of the Mississippi. So
Peter has an interesting question. You mentioned crowds. Seems to be, a hot topic around Glacier these days. And the Conservancy published a study about traffic patterns on different trails in our latest publication. Peter's, I guess, interested in your opinions and options to address overcrowding on trails.
Yeah, that's the perennial question of just whether it's driving into a park and parking or hiking or whatever it is. And I personally, I don't like it. I want the park to be just all me when I go there. In some ways, I feel that one of the park's purposes they end up kind of being the sacrificial lamb for other wilderness areas, because they are accessible to people. They are Instagram worthy. They do attract a lot of people. And maybe I'm just talking myself into this, but I do feel that it's a way for people to see incredible spaces, so that when it comes time to protect other places that are similar, they're like, oh, that looks a lot like Zion, or that looks a lot like Glacier. And so I think it makes an easier case for conservation in other areas. That being said, we just came from Arches, and there's obviously plenty of people in Arches, and we did Devil's Garden. And I just have to change my approach to my hike. And some of that is observing the wildlife that is the hominids. Just, seeing people walk around. I mean, I'll ask people, like, we'll be standing there looking at an arch, and I'm like, you want me to take a picture of you guys? And then they'll return the favor. And so it kind of turns a little bit, it changes the way that I would explore, versus when we go into, we did a canyoneering route just outside of Goblin Valley, and it was just basically us there. And so those are different experiences. And I think that as these parks, as busy as they are, I just think that we just have to adjust some of what our expectations are. But I think that we're going to see more shuttles and more ticketing systems. People hate it. People hate being, hearing that you can't just drive up and do something, because we've just been so used to it. But at some point, the damage to the area and the horrible experience when there's, how many people can the High Line handle? Is it, 5,000? Is it 10,000 a day? Is it 50,000 a day? I mean, at some point you've got to limit it. I mean, that's what they did at Half Dome. And so I think there's probably going to be a handful of, and that just is me talking, by the way, but I think at some point they're probably going to have some kind of ticketing system for some of the hikes that are just so popular, because I don't know if there's any other way to do it.
Gia asked about She says that she usually hikes later in August, and some trails are usually closed because of huckleberry season. And I guess she's asking about your planning for your trip and how seasonal closures and just sort of how you went about planning to get in all the hikes.
Yeah, well, usually they don't close them for huckleberries. Usually they'll close if there's a bear that's been aggressive on an area, and so that means that's obviously not one you want to go on. Once again, there was some dumb luck with my project. The following year after my project, there was a bear that would not leave 50 Mountain Campground, and I would not have been able to do my project without 50 Mountain because I had to go past it a couple times, and there's obviously a trail there. Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons. I mean, not to keep pushing my map, but I think that's one of the reasons why having a resource like my map handy is important, because there's so many people that come here and they know what they're going to do. They're going to do the High Line, they're going to go Iceberg, they're going to do Grinnell, and they're coming in May. Everybody that's familiar with Glacier knows that you cannot hike those. Or they drive up to, they're going to do the High Line and they try and come in August at 11 o'clock. And obviously that's not happening either. So, Mike Tyson says everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And I think everybody has a plan of what they're going to do in Glacier until they show up and they can't park. Then they go to Mini Glacier because they're going to do all these wonderful hikes and it's one in, one out. And they're like, well, what do we do now? And so I think that no matter where you go, I don't care what park you go to, having backup plans and just being super flexible is the name of the game, especially the national parks, because my other thing is my strategy is always eat your breakfast at the trailhead. Know the night before where you're going to go, try to park or stay as close as you possibly can. And if you can't, wake up early and get to the trailhead and have, when I would be in other parks, I had a camper van, so I could cook my breakfast at the trailhead, which was very handy. But even so, like, Kristen and I wake up early and we'll drive to a trailhead and we will, it's bagels and cream cheese kind of a thing. Like, you just have to eat and you just get there early because you're not guaranteed a parking spot. You're not guaranteed admittance or anything. So that's, and then just obviously be checking in with, trail status or talking to rangers or whatever, because just being prepared. So.
You already touched on what's next on your list, but did you want to add to that at all? What parks may be next for a map?
Yeah, I kind of did touch on those. I think that we'll see if I, like I said, we'll see if I do other parks. At this point, I'm interested in, we made a decision after my Yosemite map to not really focus much on distribution and just focus on getting the maps done, which obviously now there's more ticketing, there's, COVID hit. So I was really glad that we focused on that. So from a business standpoint, I need to focus on distribution. And then I honestly want to spend some time every single year. I want to get up on the ridge at Jewel Basin for the Hawk Watch and up to Mount Brown for the Eagle migration, because I'm a serious bird nerd and I love doing that. And it's not been a function of ability. It's just been a function of time and availability. So for me, being able to just hike in my backyard park and being able to explore some of that. And I have almost all of my Olympic blogs, all of my Yosemite blogs, all of my Rocky Mountain blogs that I haven't put out. So I've got so much footage that's super, it's amazing places. I was at Yosemite a couple years ago when they had record snowpack. And so I have videos of waterfalls that are unbelievable. So anyways, there's a lot that I have to share before I jump into new parks. So yeah. Wow,
that sounds awesome. We've got a camper van shopper here. Wants to know what kind of camper van you have, what recommendations or hints.
Yes, I love my camper van. We have a 1995 Road Trek 190. Camper vans are hard to get now. If anybody's been RV shopping recently, you know that that is not an easy thing. I love camper vans in national parks because I move around quite a bit. If you're the kind of person who parks, it likes to stay in one campground for like a week, camper vans might not be the best option, but if you're like us where you like to move around quite a bit. But we found one on RV Trader, and we had it inspected remotely, and we bought a one-way ticket down to Florida and drove the thing home not because my wife's crazy, but because I'm crazy. And so, yeah, but I saw people with camper vans, and it's the way that I explore. But ours has like a fridge and a toilet and a sink, and so it works really well for us. But I think definitely looking at how you explore is and how big is your group, or how many dogs you're going to bring along in your camper van. I've seen like 5, and that is miserable to me. But understanding what your needs are, I think is a big thing. So
I think Amy and Jake, I think that Emily has run the randomizer, and we have our first contest winner. So Jake, what do you got for us?
We have, I did an event. Oh, here we go. We got a little reflection. So I did an event where I used to do some presentations with the Conservancy. And this one right here we recorded one when I was in Helena. So this is the presentation, and it sounds, I don't know, watching a presentation on DVD might not sound super awesome, but you get to see a lot of cool footage, and you get to hear more of my voice. So if that's not something you want, then this is not for you. But if it is, and you love the sweet sound of my voice and some pictures of like bears, and this is the story of my summer with Hike 734. So that would be the first one. This is also available on my website for those non-winners. You're all
very cool. And I think winner number 1 is Steve Benson. So clap for Steve. And Steve will get your contact information to Jake, and he'll stick that in the mail for you. Want to do number 2?
Nice work, Steve. Sure. Little Beatles reference here when I named this one. This would be the Day Trippers package, which is the Going to the Sun Road driving guide, which started it all. And then the day hikes of Glacier National Park. And, so yeah, let's find out who's the lucky winner on this one.
Okay,
it's a better adventure.
Training.
It's a better adventure upside down. If you read the map upside down. Okay,
the winner
is
when you tell Jake Odacombe. That's what you get when you tell Jake Odacombe he shouldn't be number 42.
Ashley. Ashley Warren is our winner.
Nice.
All right.
Yes. Okay, package number 3.
Oh, package number 3.
Oh, we're going all out. Everybody logs off after we get rid of these, by the way. This would be the collection right here. This would be the rainbow collection right here. I should have organized them more. But yeah, so we've got Zion, we have, Yosemite. I was making sure that wasn't Tetons. And then Glacier, Grand Teton, Rocky, Olympic, and Yellowstone. So this is the quiver, the full quiver right here of day hike maps.
That's going to fill your summer. Peter Husking is our winner there. So you've got a lot of hiking ahead of you, Peter, this summer.
Peter, you're going to be very, very busy. Is that the Yellowstone?
Started hiking there 50 years ago, and so you can see Brown Pass in the background, and we love it.
Excellent.
That's awesome.
Yes.
And I take it, Jake, that's the Yellowstone, the Yellowstone map in English, not in Chinese, like the one you made for then Senator or Ambassador Baucus?
Yeah, if anybody does, I do have the Yellowstone map in Mandarin Chinese. That is a specific dialect. So if anybody is fluent or wanting to learn Mandarin, I do have that translated over. So.
Well, we've got
thanks,
still
Jake.
some more. Yeah, thank you so much, Jake. And we've got some more great questions, Amy. I love it.
We do. I'm going to go back to Lana's question. Jake, Lana wants to know, most everyone says you should never hike alone, but you do. What are the pluses and minuses?
So hiking alone. So I get to ask this question every once in a while from people that are from out of town that are like, they do the same, they ask that question. So obviously my first response is always hike hike with other people. It's safer. And if you get in trouble, it's really nice to have other people. The most anxiety I've ever had was, I think it was called Lake of the Clouds in Rocky Mountain National Park. And it was going to be a really big day for me, going into a mountain range called the Never Summer Mountains. And that is by far the best name of a mountain range I have ever heard. It feels Lord of the Rings, and it's fantastic. They're beautiful. But I was going up to the top of those, and in the process, whenever I go into an area that's lightly traveled and I'm by myself, I don't love that. I mean, part of me loves it because I end up getting a lot of it's fun to see stuff, but I also have this, I also know that if something happens to me, that there's not going to be somebody coming across my body, and I don't love that. So the idea of hiking alone also is, are you actually hiking alone? So sometimes I'll be hiking a trail, like, I don't know if you've ever hiked alone on the Highline Trail. You actually aren't. So there's a lot of times when I'm actually not hiking by myself. But there are other times where I definitely am hiking by myself. And so on that one in particular, I ended up getting there was a little bit of off trail that I needed to do. And anyways, it was the anxiety that I felt in that, because I knew that, if things were going to go sideways, I was going to be in trouble. So the upside to it is that I don't hear a lot of, the sun's coming in and out, thus my camera is freaking out here. So, but I can stop and listen to whatever, whenever I want. And when I'm working on my map project, one of the things that I really need to do a lot of times is I need to try and evaluate trails as consistently as possible. And if you have a really great conversation on a trail, all of a sudden you could have hiked 5 miles and not even realized it. So one of the big advantages of when I'm hiking by myself with my map project is I'm able to be more aware of the trail, and I can go ahead and stop and basically do my job. Also, being a birder, when I'm hiking with my wife, who is not so much a birder, as in she's not, she likes wild things and nature and stuff. But when I'm out there and I hear something and I really want to see what it is, and I'm fine spending 30 minutes looking up in a tree to try and see if I can figure out what that warbler or what that sparrow is in the brush, something like that. But so that when I can hiking by myself, I can stop and do that at any point. And when you're hiking with others, you can't. But what I love about hiking with other people, other than the safety factor and all that, is I love great conversation. I love sharing moments with people. And you learn new things both about the people and about the environment too, because different people have different perspectives and stuff. So, so I mean, generally my recommendation is to not hike alone for mainly safety reasons. But then hiking by yourself is, there is benefits to it as well. So, yeah.
Janet, who has joined us for many, many of these conversations, is wondering, since you've hiked in different parks, is there a scent that you found distinctive to each?
Oh, a scent, huh?
That's a great question.
It is a really good question. I don't know if there's, man, that's a really interesting question. I'm sure that I would say, I'm sure that there's certain things that would bring me back to certain parks. I mean, I just can't think of it off the top of my head, honestly. But Kristen and I were just down in the Moab area, and there was something blooming on the trail that was so fragrant and so amazing that I know that if I ever smell that again, I am totally going to be back in the Cathedral Valley. It is, I think that the scent is one of those, it's one of those old evolutionary traits that we have. But yeah, that's interesting. I'm gonna have to think about that a little bit more. But I definitely, obviously, the springtime smells different than the fall, and it's interesting because we noticed that when we got into certain areas, when you can smell the forest smells different, and you don't get that in Zion. The oak scrub in Yosemite is definitely a whole different animal. So no, that's fun. I like that a lot.
Yeah, and eucalyptus, right? Because we're not going to be a eucalyptus park, but
Not a
if
lot.
we were with Stacy in Carmel, we'd be all about the eucalyptus, which has a very distinct. That's a really interesting way to think about it. Yeah,
Yeah, that's great.
that's your next thing, Jake. A scratch and sniff.
Yeah. I'll put
So,
pictures on that.
and we want a kickback here at this group, but I think we came up with that idea for
Yeah, I think Stacy, we'll talk.
This one's from Judy and Mark. What do you think of the Porcupine Ridge Trail? How best to do this trail? And how does it look from the top?
Porcupine Ridge is great. I love that. The only way really that I know to do it is to backpack. And when they finally opened Goat Haunt back up, I think that's a fantastic way to do it, is to take the boat all the way down to Goat Haunt and then camp at Kootenai Lakes and just revel in the moose. I would definitely recommend a later season trip because the moose are in rut and so they look way cooler. The highest moose density that I've ever seen was at at Kootenai Lakes. And then the one tricky part about that hike is it was a well-maintained trail up to the lookout. The one tricky part about that hike was you have to ford the river there, and it gets really deep. It's super slow, but I don't know what the deal is with the crossing there, but it is like, it is definitely, over belly button deep. So I wouldn't go early in the season for that one at all, because the mosquitoes will be terrible, but then also, you're definitely gonna have to cross. I think it's the Waterton River at that point. And for some reason, it's just the crossing there is crazily deep. But after that, it's just it's a normal like railroad grade switch back up to the top of the lookout, and the view from the lookout is fantastic. You're looking down in the lakes, and if you have some binoculars, you can see the moose in the water. You'll see these long brown trails of the slowly moving water, and then you get to look right up at Mount Cleveland, which is Glacier's tallest summit, right in front of you. It is fantastic, and you will probably be seeing it all by yourself. So if you're looking for a remoteness and an amazing, difficult lookout to get to, it's a great hike, but most likely a backpack.
And Judy and Mark again, how would you rate Dawn Mist Falls as far as waterfalls go, and why?
It's amazing. It's an amazing waterfall. I love it because it's the let's see. Yeah, it is. It's not the Mokawanus River. Anybody can help me out on this one. But yeah, so it basically crashes over and then makes an immediate turn. So you can go ahead and see it from the bottom and from the top. And the waterfall kicks up, and you get to see a rainbow a lot of times in it. And it's just one of those cool waterfalls. I mean, because the trail walks right to the top of it. So there's not like this, some waterfalls, if you want to really, get close to them, you have to do some bushwhacking. But with this, there's none of that. So yeah, you get to see some American dippers usually, and it's a beauty. And once again, it's not crowded because you're up in the Belly River area. And so there's no, you don't have that, the nonsense of crowds trying to trip over each other. So that's always a bonus.
Alex gave you a kudos for your color-coded order of Jake's order of hikes maps. So kudos to the color coding.
Gotta have colors.
I'm reading through a few more. Sandy says that she's trying to finish all 734 miles in the park, not in a year, just before she dies. I was trying to ask if the 734 includes all marked trails on your map, including the backcountry trails, or does the 734 only include the 88 numbered trails?
It is all of the backcountry trails, and definitely shoot me an email, Jake at Hike734 for the other couple that aren't on there. And you can kind of decide on how you want to tweak what all of the trails are. There's a couple of them. I mean, there's one of them that I hiked that is, I didn't actually hike it. I basically was standing over, there's an old, so the map that I used from the park included what's called class 4 trails. And class 4 trails are essentially trails they keep track of for administrative or historical purposes. And one of those was called the Lime Springs Trail. And that's off of the Flathead Ranger Station. And so I could kind of find the beginning of it. And then from there, I was like walking on Downfall because of the fire that burned in that area. There was another one they keep track of up Mineral Creek, which is, if there's a trail that goes up to Flat Top Mountain. And so it follows along starting from Packers Roost, and you cross the bridge, or right where the bridge crossing is over Mineral Creek, where it enters into McDonald Creek. There's an old ranger station up there, and they don't maintain that trail anymore. And so technically speaking, it's part of the 734, but I think you could pass off on that one and say you've hiked all the trails. So I would work on the ones that are really officially recognized as maintained trails in the park. You're more than welcome to give that one a whirl as well. It's a lot of ducking and crossing over. The ranger station burned, so they no longer maintain it, but they keep track of it because there's a snowtail site up there. So they have a bunch of historical data of snow levels in the middle of winter. So they ski to that, I believe, every year and see what the snow levels are. So they keep track of it. So technically it's considered a trail. But as far as what you would want to do for hiking, I mean, unless you're a sadist, I would stay away from it.
Can you comment on the Northern Highline north of Granite Chalet? Mike says that it's something he's always wanted to hike. Uh-oh, maybe not.
We might have paused Jake.
Oh, I'm back. I'm back.
You were very still for a moment.
Yep, and Zoom's telling me my internet is unstable. I was wondering if that was going to happen. We're back though. My satellite internet is reconnected. Thanks, Elon.
I thought Mike just stumped you with his question. Finally had stumped you, but he just wanted to know about the Northern Highline north of Granite Park Chalet. It's something he's always wanted to hike.
He should. That place is amazing. 50 Mountain is one of my favorite campsites. There was one evening where I was up there. I know one evening I saw, or one time when I came up there, I watched Pine Marten running around up there. But in the evening, watching a sow and 2 cubs, like further on up the Highline, just foraging through the meadows, eating glacier lily bulbs as the sun was setting over the Livingston Range was just something I won't ever forget. And they call it 50 Mountain because you can see 50 summits from there. And it feels like the magic of Ireland. Whenever I look at pictures of Ireland, just these huge green slopes that just turn up into Kippen Cathedral behind you. And that stretch, once you just north of that, that's when you drop down into the Kootenai Lakes, into that, the Waterton River drainage. And that starts to, that just becomes forest hiking. But up until that point, it's just the Highline Trail continued without people. So it's pretty magical. I really do love that section. So this
next question is my kind of question. Is there a luxury item that you like to bring on the trail?
Binoculars would probably be my luxury item. I think that everybody should hike with binoculars, even if you're not a birder. There's just too many verification. Is that a stump? Is that a moose bedded down? Is that an owl? Whatever it is, binoculars allow you to see so much more. So that would be one luxury item. I hike with Ricolas. That's my little power pellet. So that's my other sneak. So if you smell Ricolas on the trail, if you see a Ricola wrapper, it is not mine, it was an accident. But if you smell Ricolas, I'm probably nearby.
That could go in the smell portion of our program.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not location specific.
We're all about the Jolly Rancher.
Too tart for me, too sour. I fatigue on that. I can eat Ricolas for miles, but the hard candy is a win for me.
Yep.
Got to go with the hard candy.
This is a good topic, I think, for chat. So if others want to share their luxury specific candy items, we'd love to hear them. Mine is definitely cinnamon bears all the way.
Oh, that's not a bad option.
Keeps me going. What about your favorite dog-friendly trail in the area? Do you have dogs, Jake?
We don't have dogs, so whenever I talk to my friends, I'm like, oh, hey, let's go in the park. I'm like, oh, we can't because we have Taika with us. But that's one of the things I want to do this summer is spend more time hiking in the national forest. So that would be more dog friendly stuff. So maybe check with me later at the end of the summer and I'll know more of better places to take your dog.
We got a bit of honey application there. That's solid. That'll last for a while.
It does. It needs to last for a while. That's the ticket. You don't want you don't want something that just, Necco wafers or something like that to just, well, that'd be okay, but those are disgusting. So.
Ooh, lemon drop kid.
Love it.
Yeah.
All right, Jake, a few more and just a few more minutes here. So if you guys have questions, put them in the chat. Have you been to Sperry since the restoration?
I have not been to Sperry since the restoration. I'm too busy hiking other parks. And once again, that is one of the problems of hiking other parks. So I'm excited to go back there. I'm looking forward to it. I want to know how loud it is between the different rooms. That's the tell.
So I did have the opportunity to stay up there last year, Jake, and Jake does have a good, but perhaps not G-rated story. I think that might though be about Granite, when you stayed at Granite or Sperry.
No, never stayed at Granite. It was definitely at Sperry. It wasn't just so we can temper this a little bit. It was maybe PG-13.
Right.
Overhearing conversations about myself from the room next door. So it was more. So that was it was flattering, but it was definitely a conversation that they did not know that I was hearing. And so for the rest of the night, I was quiet as a mouse because they did not want to embarrass these people, knowing that I had overheard them talking about me the previous night. But is it quieter up there now?
So Julie and I were going to go take a little nap, and we laid down to take said nap, and we could hear the woman next door playing solitaire, not shuffling the cards. That was like an earthquake, but the actual playing of an individual card, we could hear. It's almost like I could tell what she was playing.
Yeah, you're like,
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1. It's like, oh my gosh. No.
The magic is still there. The magic is still there.
The magic is still there. Yeah. Well, and speaking of magic, Jake Bramante, we try and hold these things to an hour. I think we could talk all night, but we want to be respectful of your time and of our donors' time together with us. What a treat to be able to spend some time with you tonight, Jake. Tell Kristen thank you for sparing you for an hour, and to all of you who make this magic happen at the Conservancy. Thank you so much as well. We do these events and we do what we do only because you provide your gifts to us that makes us possible. And we are very excited to be able to have an incredible group of projects happening start right now. Clark's Nutcracker work is happening in the park right now. It's super exciting. We're going to see if we can get one to poop on Jake later. We're very excited. Next year, they've proposed a Wolverine study, which will be fundraising for this year. That's super exciting for us as well. The podcast, if you have not checked out the Headwaters podcast, I highly encourage you to do so. We funded 2 park rangers, Michael and Andrew, who have become kind of rock stars in the podcast world. And we're funding season 2, which Again, it's going to be themed on the Clark's Nutcracker slash White Bark Pine, and it's super exciting. So lots going on. All around the park. The ticketed entry starts tomorrow. It'll be interesting, or the 28th. Tomorrow. So it'll be interesting to see how that all rolls. We were able to help with some smoothing. Again, thanks to you, some smoothing of that process as it went forward. So here's to seeing each other in the park. Jake, here's to seeing you soon. And thanks again for all of your help. And thanks for another great conversation with Friends of Glacier. Good night, everybody.
Thanks, Jake.
Yeah.